I'm going to start with a short quote from Suzuki Roshi. And I always thought this is very cute, the way he said this. The secret of Soto Zen is 2 words, not always so. Oops. 3 words in English. In Japanese, 2 words. Not always so. This is the secret of the teaching. It may be so, but it's not always so. Without being caught by ideas, we actually do something, and doing something, we apply our teaching. Oops, not always so. Everyday life is full of assumptions and expectations, and as a result, disappointment, and I always like the way, I can't remember who used it, might have been Icon, but dis-ease. Dis-ease. Like that, because it's both the physical and the mental in that. We assume that the train's going to come on time, that lunch is going to be served, that people are going to be civil, or at least leave us alone. When these things don't happen, anger, fear, and stress just ravage us. Our body and mind. And even, if it's something really trivial, it feels so awful. It fills me with tension and strain and fear because the train didn't come on time. Now, sure, trains should be on time, and we should all be kind to each other. But this is samsara, and we know that's not how it works here. We create this hell. It's created by me. And it doesn't mean that we're not accountable, that no one's accountable. It means we all are. My anger and my frustration acted out doesn't help the situation. But how does this imperfect mind, avoid contributing to this, this melee, this chaos, this, tension in the air? This is what I think is an example of practice, or something that comes up for me. Sitting on a bus, really tired after a long day of disappointments and my assumptions being busted, and irritation and anger and frustration, the usual stuff. A young woman gets on the bus and she sits right next to me. She smells of oil and grease. She has on her McDonald's costume and platter with food and, the crazy hats, crazy headgear that make you wear at McDonald's. She sits down right next to me and not feeling all that charitable that day. Oh dear. I don't know this person. They just sat down next to me. Could have been any person, really. But my irritation from something else is affecting the atmosphere between us, at least on my end. So she sits down next to me, and of course her phone rings. Flip. And she answers the phone, and her voice is loud. She's trying to, kind of scream over the roar of the bus and the traffic outside that we're going through, trying to be heard. And she's shouting into the phone, and then suddenly she bursts into this really loud laughter scared me, I jumped, because I'm so tense, so angry and frustrated. Any one other piece of stimulation, to irritate, to, just adds. Even something little like somebody laughing, for God's sake. So she burst into her laugh, and I want so bad to turn and just tell her to be quiet, put that phone away. Girl, we on a bus. But for some reason, for one moment, I had this little moment where I stopped and I listened to what she was saying. It's her birthday. She's thanking someone for remembering her on her birthday. And it's been one of those days for her too. Obviously, she's got the, battle, the ketchup on her, costume, like blood, from a battle. She's been through it today, and it's her birthday. And no, she's not doing anything special. She's gonna pick up the kids, gonna go home and cook some spaghetti, and go to bed. Sounds just like me. So I'm sitting there, and he gets up to get off the bus, and I just touched her on the arm and I said, "Happy birthday." And I'm like, so close to throwing my delusion out there and hurting someone on their birthday. Not hurting, but you know what I mean. Trivial and little can change someone's world, even if it's for a second. She kind of looked at me funny, but much better than, us having an argument on the bus, because we're both so frustrated. Right speech is so simple and yet so hard. But it just took that moment between hearing bird song and judging a bird. Just that moment to awaken to what's really going on here. The Eightfold Path isn't easy to walk. It's one foot in front of the other. Yes. But take those steps with care. And sometimes I forget. And I'm so scared. I'm just running, kicking dust all over the place, tripping myself up, stepping on worms and other people's feet without care. But this is practice. Practice is dropping body and mind, letting go of that baggage that says, this is all about me. This is what this is. This is bothering me. This is the fault. This is the problem. That's not the problem. There are bigger problems. But the only way to solve little or big problems is to clear the ground and build the altar and focus on what is real. My teacher used to say that all the time. I forget what she was attaching that to. It has something to do with some characters, clear the ground, build an altar. Body and mind, delusion and judgment and greed are so heavy. They'll have us weaving all over the road and eventually staggering off the path and getting tangled in the brush. And that's part of the practice too, you know. I could have made that mistake on the bus, made so many those kinds of mistakes all over, you know. I had it wasn't really a fight, but it was kind of a thing going on in my office, you know. I had a stapler on my interview desk, and it would always disappear. And in my brain, the lady that sat on the other side, because she was adult Medicaid and I was child Medicaid, and so she's sitting on the other side, and of course there's this non-existent rivalry between adult Medicaid and child Medicaid. Silliness. Different departments, like we're different departments, really. And so this little thing came up between us, and we kept stealing that stapler. I have mine, I'd have it on my desk, and then I'd come back, from getting my client, and it'd be gone. And she'd get up to go make her copies, and I'd go over there. And it could have been a fun little game, but, and we could have been adults, but nope. So there we were, little things like that, causing each other stress. There's so many bigger things going on. But like I said, it's hard to walk that path, with all your junk. But it's part of even those mistakes, even those silly, falling into, delusion, madness, outright silliness. Doesn't make sense. Something you made up. That's part of practice, because that's what we learn to see. And we have to learn, we see it so easily, quote unquote, or we think we see it in other people. But we can't really see it in ourselves so easily until we just run up against that wall. Just like Dogen, people always, that false quote of Dogen's continuous, mistake, one continuous mistake. I actually found it. Okay. He said, there's a principle of the way that we must make one mistake after another. What is this like? Whether Buddha is present or not present, I trust he is right under our feet. Face after face is Buddha's face. Fulfillment after fulfillment is Buddha's fulfillment. So it's not exactly that quote, but it's kind of close. Mistake, one mistake after another is what we're studying here when it says to study the self. That's what we're looking at. Studying that and seeing those mistakes, seeing those points where we weave off the path, not because someone pushed us or whatever, but because we're outright drunk with ourselves, outright drunk with all our junk and our ego. And so we make mistakes. So from this, maybe the trick to right speech, right thought, staying on the path, is giving myself a little space, and that little space is zazen. And I'm not talking about zazen on the cushion. I'm talking about, we talk about zazen in life. There's your zazen, that one breath that you take before you respond to something, especially when that something stirs up my delusion. It's hard to do that because the world comes at us so fast, especially now. It comes so fast. But we have to practice. We have to practice so that the way the frustration and anger and ego comes up so automatically, so does that breath. Just take 1 second, 1 second to let that bird song be a part of you. And you be a part of the bird song. And recognize what's real. It's taking that breath and that little space, that little zazen, and asking not, am I right? Or is that true? You know, without those subjective words and judgment, and say, is that so? Because it's not about relative truth and good, or this is good or bad. It's about what is actualizing in this very moment and being a part of that moment, because what's actualizing in this very moment is Buddha nature, what we're digging for, you know, when we do our zazen, and what letting that manifest, be itself, be it. Is this real in this time and space? And what is the response I can muster right now? What is the way right before me? This brings me to another one of my favorite stories from the treasury of Buddha knowledge that we have of our Buddha ancestors, of Hakuin and the girl. Quickly, Hakuin, you know, is living in his temple, and you know, in the village, there's this young girl who falls in love and gets pregnant. Her parents find out, and she is terrified, and she's shamed. Doesn't seem to have much, you know, support from the dude she, you know, was with, because he doesn't get mentioned in any of the stories until the end. You know, what's that? Okay, let me put that down. But you know, she's in trouble, and she makes a choice to protect this man, and for some reason blame Hakuin and says it's his baby. And so, you know, most of you probably know the story. You know, she has the baby, and the parents bring the baby to Hakuin and says, "You take care of this. How dare you? You know, ruin my daughter," or whatever the sentiment is from parents in that time. So you take care of this baby. And of course, there's one more mouth for them to feed, and you can kind of get some understanding of what their situation is if you're, you know, have a little compassion for them too. And so Hakuin takes the child and he says, "Is that so?" But he takes the child. He takes the child and he raises it. You know, his reputation out there is ruined because, you know, at that time, priest was supposed to be celibate and all that kind of stuff. You know, forget what the reality is, but that's the idea. And you know, he takes this child, and his ability to fulfill his role as a priest, his ability to receive donations, to take care of the temple, and on top of that, to care for a child in poverty. He takes that. That's his response. And eventually, because she's a young mother, the young girl comes clean, and she wants her child back. And she comes and he gives it back to her. And he says, "Is that so?" And he lets this child that he's been taking care of for a year, gives her back to him back to the mother. Let's go. Now, maybe Hakuin is saying to the parents when they come and they take give him the child, he said, and they're accusing him, of all these things. Is that so? Really? But maybe he's also saying to himself, is that so? Because he sees here a young woman in trouble, scared and ashamed, unsupported by parents or by her lover, whoever it is. And he sees a child that needs to be taken care of. Is that so? What is this? What's real here? When he has to give up the child and give the child back to its mother without judgment, is that so? Reunites a family and keeps going. Now, nowadays, somebody goes up to the temple, bangs on the door, "Hey, this your baby?" Court case, go and, have that, test, see whose baby it is. All those things, all these choices we have to do today. Times are much more complicated. Injustice is rife. And too often, the response is anger, frustration, or outright violence towards people. And it's hard to hear what's really going on over all of this fighting. And sometimes it's hard to even figure out what the heck we're fighting about. But maybe just taking that 1 minute, that little minute of zazen before I respond, and doing my best to awaken to reality without my judgment and anger in the way. It can help to just ease a bit of my suffering and avoid more suffering for others through my inability to respond appropriately and compassionately because of all my bags piled so high I can't even see in front of me. So I'm, stumbling and weaving all over the place. Can't even stay in my lane. I got to get in yours and tell you what to do. I have to remember that I don't have to be right. I just have to be fully here, apply some compassion, and maybe through that come about with a bit of wisdom and act with a bit of wisdom, speak with a bit of compassion, encounter the world with a bit of joy instead of all this me, all this I. Again, Suzuki Roshi says in that quote, without being caught by ideas, we actually do something, and doing something, we apply our teaching. It's always the question, how do I apply this teaching? And maybe it's just that. The door opens, breathe, zazen, drop body and mind, and walk through and see what's really on the other side. Without assumption, without wanting something, without what should and should not be, what's true and what's right and wrong. Go see. Be awake to it. Be aware that sometimes, it's just not so. So I think that's all I want to say about that. There was another quote that I was really taken with because I hadn't read the book in a long time. This is it. Okay. And it's a little, off the thing, but it awful, not really, nothing's off what we're saying here. I've been having trouble with my robes this morning. I think I've gained some weight since I've been here. And so it's not really fitting the way I want it to fit. Now maybe it's just me this morning not being in being a little physically challenged. But it says, real freedom is not to feel limited when wearing this Zen robe, this troublesome formal robe. Similarly, in our busy life, we should wear civilization without being bothered by it, without ignoring it, without being caught by it, without going anywhere, without escaping it. We can find composure in this busy life. If I take the robe as being this Dharma practice, doesn't mean that, that we're all monks and nuns and stuff like that. It just means that we've taken on this Dharma practice and we're going to wear it as best we can. This troublesome practice. We wear it and we wear our life in this samsara, not to be bothered by it, he says, but not to be consumed by it, and caught up in, what's Dharma, what's not Dharma, whatever. The practice is to simply wear it as best we can. And even with those mistakes, even when it's on a little crooked, apply the Dharma. And the Dharma is that breath, And the Dharma is the Eightfold Path. And the Dharma is everything the Buddha and the ancestors have taught us about compassion and equanimity and have some confidence in it. And when you see it slipping, give it a little tug and sit down. I don't know. I always at the end of trying to, make these notes, find something that I'm like, oh, yeah. Even though I'm not quite clear why that connects or not. And it might not connect for you. It does somehow for me. But so thank you again for listening. And hopefully, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to say, anything you'd like to add.
And I have a microphone, so feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. You can also raise your hand online and we can unmute you. Griffin,
Hi,
go ahead. Yes.
this is Griffin. First, I would like to thank you for these weeks of demonstrating an authentic expression of the present moment in this body on this earth. Because especially today, I feel that dis-ease. This morning, I'm alone, my leg hurts. I want to be at city center. And I find myself walking around the house, not knowing what to do with myself. As if I could choose a better present moment. Even as you say, hearing the wind whistle past me as I fall. I'm wondering if I can position myself to be seen, to be loved, and simultaneously feeling the absurdity of that perspective. I wonder if you can help me.
You brought up something for me. You are loved. You have to believe that. You have to understand that these circumstances that we have, whether it's pain in our bodies, loneliness, it's because we fail to find that connection that is real, that is there. You turned on your Zoom this morning. You opened up the electronic portal to this place that I don't know how often you've been here, but it means something to you. You can't touch these people right now, but you've done your best to reach out. And Zen Center has done its best to open the portal on this side. This is just a moment in your day, open to sharing the Dharma with people, sharing life with people. Yeah, it feels a strange way. I get that because I have trouble with technology too. But it's a good reach. It is touching. It is remembering that there are many myriad beings out there from this side and from your side who are all in this with us. Sometimes we don't know what we mean when we say love. And sometimes it's this tiny moment of electronic being together. I can't fix that for you. All I can say is keep reaching. We're reaching back for you. Somebody always is. When you can, when things get better, and you can come and sit in the room. Remember, and it'll be so sweet. And if you never get to come, and you stay online or visit someplace else, just remember what's real is the real, it's the connection is real. And the world is tough. But there is love for you and everyone else. I don't know you. I can't even see you right now. Thank you. And I hope things get better for you. Anyone else? Good morning.
All right. Thank you so much for the very beginning when you were telling that story about your hard day and painting that picture of your emotional reservoir being full, and then talking about the young woman next to you and how that you instantly had this reaction and maybe even this story. And what do you do? I'm just always curious at that point because that's such a human point for everybody. Everybody on the planet can, I think, identify with that story. And when your emotional reservoir is full and something happens and you realize I've got a story and there's something I'm inclined to say. Is there anything you can say just about what you do in your practice at that point, right there, that where you go to or what you do to look at that or to work with that?
Well, I'd like to say that every time I take a breath but sometimes it doesn't work that way. I try to be conscious, especially when something is working me or whether it's not something, when I'm working it, when I'm working it up, something makes me angry. Something makes me feel uncomfortable. I try to be conscious that that's happening, that I'm doing that. And I try to let it go and ask that question, is that so? And sometimes it comes up it doesn't always come out, roses or anything. But sometimes I can let go of a little bit of my suffering and actually listen to what's happening. If it's an altercation or exchange, really, not calling it an altercation, because that, if it's an exchange and I don't feel comfortable, at least in here, I can drop a little bit and really listen to what's going on, what that person is saying. And sometimes we just roll into it because we're running so fast. Sometimes I'm sort of like my mother. I shouldn't tell these stories on her, but I grew up in, circumstances, and my mother had a tough time, and she was always fighting. And so we always think we have to, be on our guard, and we have to throw up the walls. And so even when we go to a store, my mother was always exchanging things. She'd never try anything on in a store. She'd want to go back and exchange it or get a return or whatever. And she would steel herself. You could actually see it. He's going to have an argument with these people because they're not going to take it back. And I'm just like that. Like that. I got to get ready because it's always going to be a fight. And then you go into the store and you get the nicest clerk. And she's like, oh, yeah, okay. And one time she even took it back and they gave her more money because she had gotten it on sale and they gave it to her for the full price. She's ready to fight. I inherited that, And so sometimes if I'm conscious, that morning before I go out the door, I try to put that down because I know that that's what came from the study of myself. This big breath that I'm taking before I go out the door and boom, all the armor comes up. What am I doing? That's from a cartoon somewhere. Where the armor comes up automatically. Boom. And instead, before that armor comes up, I want that breath, what I hope for, what I aspire to, is for that breath to let it all fall. And before I go out the door, drop it. Now I'd probably by the time I get to the corner, probably all, armored up and shields and all kinds of sharp tongue weapon of choice. You just have to be conscious of it. And it's different for everybody. You know what your baggage is. You know what your weapons are. Put them down, or at least try for a minute. And approach people, without it. Doesn't mean you won't get hurt. Doesn't mean you won't, hack win, But what's important here? What are you shielding yourself from that you can actually make better? Not better, but have less suffering. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seems like we have another question online.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I really appreciated it. And I had a question that kind of follows on what you were just saying about the story with Hakuin and is it so or is it right? And in the story with Hakuin, that making that choice, perhaps he was less able to take care of the congregation by accepting taking care of the baby.
Mhm.
And in what instances is kind of incorporating the is it right, either to include oneself in self-compassion or to look at the bigger picture. How do we strike that balance?
I think it always depends on the circumstances, the situation, on that particular now. You know. So that's a hard question to answer. There's lots of things wrong in the world. And there's lots of stuff, that makes it hard for me as a person, and for me as all of us, you know. And it's hard to really say that. In a particular situation, maybe it's this now, when I see Hakuin doing, and in a sense, he didn't stop his teaching, even if his temple closed. Part of wearing these robes and part of living in the Dharma is to manifest it. And maybe in that particular time, and in this particular story, however it is, the best way for him to wear the Dharma was to be a father to this child and to show people that it's not about his reputation or even about the temple. Because remember, there's two sides to this story. There's the people who, rejected him because, they closed the temple as much as he did, even if he was at fault, whether he's at fault or not, everybody is accountable here. And we have to remember that too, in terms of balance for ourselves. We are out there, ready to fight. Or if we're not fighting, we go out there and we're trying to save the world. As if I'm the only person who can do that. As if I'm the only one that has the, has the goods. When there's plenty of people around us who can contribute and want to contribute, but I have to be in the center of it. And so I run myself ragged, doing good in the world, and use all my energy up. And then I can't do it anymore. Or I get to the point where I don't want to do it anymore. And I get to the point where I'm just so burnt out that I no longer have anything to give, and I've got to step back anyway. Whereas if I had appreciated the people around me and their talent and their energy, I could have accessed them anytime. So, like I said, it all depends on what the situation is. There's no one answer for that. There's no one answer for the problems that we, have in the world. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Mm. I invite anyone else if you have anything to say before are we at close? Yeah. Almost. Mm. Mhm. Well, again, thank you for being here. And give me opportunity to study myself a little bit more every time, and then try to talk about it. I appreciate the opportunity and I'm very glad for your presence.